Throughout American history, there have been many incidents of political violence targeting current and former presidents and candidates of major parties. Before the shooting of former President Donald Trump on July 13th, there were many cases of political violence targeting current and former presidents and candidates of major parties in the United States. Today, we will review 8 assassinations and attempted assassinations that have occurred since the founding of the United States in 1776. 1. Abraham Lincoln was the first U.S. president to be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865. At that time, he and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, attended a special performance of the comedy Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington. Mr. Lincoln was taken to a house across the street from the theater for medical treatment after being shot in the back of the head. He died the following morning. His support for black rights is widely seen as the motive behind the assassination, which shocked American history. 2 years before the assassination, during the Civil War against slavery, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, granting freedom to slaves in the Confederacy. He was succeeded by Vice President Andrew Johnson. Booth was shot on April 26th of the same year, after being found hiding in a warehouse near Bowling Green, Virginia. 2. James A. Garfield was the second president to be assassinated. He was killed for months after taking office. He was walking through a Washington train station on July 2, 1881, to catch a train to New England when he was shot by Charles Guiteau. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, tried unsuccessfully to find the bullet lodged in Garfield's chest with a device he had designed for the president. Garfield was seriously wounded and spent several weeks in the White House recovering from his injuries, dying in September from complications from his injuries. According to some historians and medical experts, Garfield might have survived his wounds if the doctors who treated him had had access to today's medical research, knowledge, techniques, and equipment. Vice President Chester Arthur later succeeded him. Meanwhile, Guiteau was convicted and executed in June 1882. 3. William McKinley was the third U.S. president to be assassinated. He was shot after giving a speech in Buffalo, New York, on September 6, 1901. He was shaking hands with people when a man shot him twice in the chest at close range. Doctors expected McKinley to recover, but gangrene soon developed around the bullet wound. The 25th President of the United States died on September 14, 1901, about 6 months into his second term. He was succeeded by Vice President Theodore Roosevelt. Leon F. Czolgosz, an unemployed 28-year-old Detroit resident, pleaded guilty to the shooting. Czolgosz was convicted in court and executed in the electric chair on October 29, 1901. From McKinley's successor, Roosevelt himself later became the victim of an assassination attempt. On October 14, 1912, former tavern owner John Schrank attempted to assassinate former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt while he was campaigning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Schrank's bullet struck Roosevelt in the chest after passing through the former president's steel eyeglass case and the 50-page copy of his speech that he was carrying in his coat pocket. Schrank was immediately disarmed and arrested. Roosevelt assured the crowd that he was fine, then ordered the police officer in charge of Schrank to ensure that no violence was inflicted on the suspect. 5. The next president to be assassinated in American history coincidentally was also a Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Mr. Roosevelt, who was the newly elected president in February 1933, had just given a speech in Miami from the back of an open car when shots rang out. He was not injured in the shooting, but Chicago Mayor Anton Chermak was killed. The perpetrator Giuseppe Zongaro was convicted and sentenced to death. 6. Harry S. Truman was also the victim of an attempted assassination. The 33rd President of the United States was staying at Blair House, across from the White House, in November 1950 when the gunmen broke in. Truman was not injured, but a White House police officer and one of the attackers were killed in the gunfight. 2 other White House police officers were injured. The remaining suspect, Oscar Collazo, was arrested and sentenced to death. In 1952, Truman commuted Collazo's sentence to life in prison. He was pardoned by President Jimmy Carter in 1979. Recent assassinations and attempted assassinations. 7. The last president in U.S. history to die in an assassination attempt was John F. Kennedy. He was shot dead by an unknown assassin armed with a high-caliber rifle while visiting Dallas in November 1963 with First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. The shots rang out as the presidential motorcade rolled through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. Kennedy was taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he died shortly thereafter. He was succeeded by Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. He was sworn in the briefing room aboard Air Force One. He is the only U.S. president to be sworn in on an airplane. Hours after the assassination, police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald. 2 days later, Oswald was being transported from police headquarters to the county jail when Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby rushed up and shot him dead. 8. The most recent president to be wounded in an assassination attempt was Ronald Reagan in March 1981. Reagan was leaving the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. and walking toward his motorcade when John Hinckley Jr. opened fire from the crowd. Reagan recovered from the shooting, which left him with a punctured lung, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. 3 others were also shot, including his press secretary, James Brady, who was left partially paralyzed. Hinckley was arrested and committed to a psychiatric hospital after a jury found him not guilty. In 2022, Hinckley was released from court supervision after a judge determined he was no longer a danger to himself or others. And most recently, the failed assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Within seconds of shots ringing out from the podium of U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign, everything changed. The moment Mr. Trump, with his face bleeding, raised his fist and shouted "fight," with the American flag behind him, became an iconic moment. The attack has raised long-standing concerns that political violence could flare up during the presidential campaign and after the election. The concerns partly reflect the polarization of the electorate, with the country seemingly sharply divided into 2 camps with different political and social visions. If you find this video useful, please leave a like and comment, share the video with more people. Thank you for watching the video.